Hey guys, welcome back to the Healing Empath. I am a Healing Empath, and today's video is going to be kind of like a rant a little bit, but I'm not really ranting, but maybe it might come off a little bit like it. And it's going to be called fried scrambled eggs. And no, I'm not talking about breakfast. I'm not talking about anything related to food, but just the saying. You know how someone can say like, oh, you're fried, or he's fried. If you haven't heard of that terminology, it's a slang terminology, and it basically states either you can be like, I'm fried because you've been exhausted all day, or you can say I'm fried, or she's fried, or he's fried because of maybe, for instance, they used to be one way when they were younger, and then their life happened and things changed for them, and now they look totally different. So someone might say, oh, he or she is quote unquote fried. Or it could just be your mind state, where your mind, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're not talking about looks, we're not talking about food, but we're going to talk about the mindset and how manipulating affects an empath, or an unhealed, unhealthy empath. Okay, so before we get into the topic, please make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. That means so much to me. And at the end of the video, please feel free, if you like it, to drop a like, and make sure you turn on your notifications. Okay, so have you ever been fried, where you specifically couldn't tell a truth from a lie? Now, this could also be where you might not have felt like this, but somebody could have been doing this to you as well. Okay, so when it comes to someone else doing it to yourself, that's different, but you also can do it to yourself. Okay, so sometimes we can tell ourselves something, and you can scramble your own mind just to basically protect a fantasy, or something that, you know, a fantasy because you created it in your head. It did not happen. Okay, so today, again, we're going to talk about the mind and how manipulating affects, and I'm going to label it as the fried scrambled egg theory. Okay, and okay, so moving along, I also want to tell you guys I have notes. I have my tea here. So if you hear a few pauses, you know, there's nothing wrong with the video. It's just I drank some tea and looking at my notes. Okay, so the metaphoric theory of my fried scrambled egg thought process is when, you know how like you can fry an egg and then you see how the egg changes its form, right? But when you scramble it, everything gets mixed together, right? So once you scramble it, you can't separate the yolk from the white anymore. All right, so that's what happens when you're an unhealthy and unhealed empath, where we make sometimes we can mix a truth with a lie, our intuition with fear. And if you go back in some of my other videos where I openly talk about some small parts of my divorce and how I created this thing in my mind for safety. Yeah, but I'm going to talk about that more because it absolutely relates, but I'm calling myself out too here. This is what this channel is about. If you're new here, it's about getting down to the root of being an unhealed, unhealthy empath, so we could become a healthy empath or a healed empath, or both. And I also break down the difference between an unhealthy empath and a healthy empath. All right, so moving along, we tend to, as unhealthy, unhealed empath, not a healthy empath, but we tend to we mix truth with lies at times, intuition, we mix it with being fearful, love, oh, this is a good one, love with delusion, and potential with reality. And now you can't tell what is what because you're fried. Okay, so that's how we go there. Okay, and one of the things that we can do, or I'm going to give other examples outside of what we do to ourselves, but I'm going to say collectively we, right, or us. Okay, so one of the things that we can do is gaslight ourselves, right? An unhealed empath really doesn't have to just get gaslit by a man or a family member or a friend. We can also gaslight ourselves. And it most likely will happen if, like I said, if you're unhealed or unhealthy. And we can say things like, oh, he's a good guy, or she's a good woman, or they didn't mean it, right? Or it's not that bad, even when our body feels tight, or when our intuition is loud, right? We create stories in our head that never happen. And hear me out on this. I'm not saying like we walk around creating lies, but it's more subtle. It's not loud, right? And I think this is a normal trait. It's just probably not called out as much because we grew up around some type of manipulation from a parent or a caregiver, right? And then sometimes we had to learn to twist reality a little bit to survive those white lies, right? But survival mode doesn't really equal the truth, okay? All right, so let me give you an example about how you can scramble yourself. Let's go a little deeper, okay? So sometimes, like I said before, it doesn't have to be anybody outside of yourself that has to lie to you, because you tend to lie to yourself, right? You know deep inside that maybe he's not a good man. You've already seen the red flags, right? You felt the distance or the push and pull, and you've caught the inconsistencies, and then you find out he's unfaithful, right? And he isn't honest about anything, right? And instead of you saying to yourself in a healthy manner, okay, I should leave, right? You may say he's still a good man because maybe he does 75% of what you need, right? Maybe he does 80% or 85% of what you need. So you're going to say, like, he's still a good man. He just made a mistake, or that was only one time. And by the way, when somebody says one time, it's definitely been, I would say times 10, multiplied. It's never just one, okay? Or you might say, well, that's the only bad thing he's done. So you might not take cheating as so serious as someone else, because in your mind, you believe that everybody pretty much cheats, right? So it causes you to edit your own reality, okay? And then you kind of like minimize, or we kind of minimize the betrayal, okay? So, and then when you do that, you got to think like, okay, when I'm minimizing the betrayal, right? At this point, you're protecting the very thing that is hurting you, okay? And that's called self-gaslighting. That's how we end up gaslighting ourselves. That's scrambling your own mind, because integrity isn't meticulous or selective, right? A good man doesn't just cheat, quote unquote, once. Okay, a man that cheats doesn't respect you. A good woman doesn't just betray you one time. Character is basically who we are. That's all we have when no one is watching. Okay, but when you're afraid or when you're insecure, you may tell yourself it's hard to find love, or I don't want to start over. That's a big one. Starting over, especially if you have things combined together. That's so incredibly hard to do, is start over, right? The only thing you can do is just like push yourself to do so, or go into it slowly. Okay. And then you might say to yourself, well, what if this is as good as it gets? So you end up basically staying, and it's not because you're not strong enough to leave in most cases. It's really because your nervous system is already on defense, and it's addicted to stress or some chaos, right? And that can cause a abandonment wound in some people, and they fear of becoming or being alone, right? And because of that, they're going to put your standards over theirs and accept it. So also, as I said before, I'm going to also compare another side, and maybe that's the hypocrite. I can't believe you. This is like the second time where I'm trying to pronounce something and I freaking tongue tie myself. But all right, so let's flip it real quick. Imagine a man who presents himself as a good person, a good husband, a good father, a good provider, somebody that is reliable. But secretly, he's out there sleeping with, paying for sexual activities with women. And that causes him to end up lying to his wife and then risking her health. And then in turn, as a whole, he ends up betraying his family. But in his mindset, he might say, I deserve this, or it's not hurting anyone, or I still take care of my responsibilities. That's what you call a fried mind. That's scrambled morality. That's scrambled. Okay, that's fried. Because you have to think, would this man want his own daughter to lie? Would he want someone to treat her like an option? You know? Would he want someone risking her health like he did with his wife, her mother? But he'll do it to someone else's daughter, right? That's being a hypocrite. That's hypocrisy. And when we stay and call that a good man, that's how we end up getting scrambled as well. So, when you're fried long enough, your nervous system normalizes the dysfunction and the stress. So anything peaceful feels what? Boring. It feels boring. The truth feels threatening. And then accountability, forget about it. It feels like somebody's coming at you with a steak knife. You know, and then in turn, you have to protect this whole thing that was created. It causes you not to fall in love with who they are. You fall in love with the hope they'll become. And as an empath, you feel everything. As an empath, you feel people's potential. But potential, and the problem is potential isn't character. It isn't present. There's no evidence that this person has character. And then hope isn't enough to make it of evidence. So I hope this helps someone, because this theory made sense to me in my mind. But you know how some things could make sense in your mind, but then for someone else it might not. So anyway, just like me, because I've definitely had some of these things that I'm talking about. So if you're listening to me, right? I've made excuses just like you. I've ignored the red flags. I stayed when I shouldn't have in the past. So you're not crazy. You were just trying to stay afloat, right? You were trying to survive this thing. But on this journey, the only thing I realized that I need to do is heal. And that requires separating from this egg again. And remember, that's pretty much impossible if you have scrambled eggs, right? If you scramble some eggs, you can't separate the yolk from the white anymore. So it's almost like it's going to be a constant healing. But one of the things that is a good thing to practice is saying this hurt me, or this isn't aligned with me, this isn't integrity. So you can't heal while you're in this energy. You know, if you have to keep, convincing someone or convincing yourself someone is good, then your spirit already knows that they're not. So like if you keep questioning yourself, is this person good? Your spirit already knows no. The answer is no. So when it comes to healing our mindset in this space, right? Healing means basically relaxing your nervous system. That's the part that it gets all wacky, and that's when things get confusing. That's when things become fried, right? So cooling your nervous system and healing means letting truth be truth, even when it's uncomfortable. So seeing things for what they are, No more minimizing the betrayal, no more romanticizing his or her potential, and no more lowering standards out of fear. So use the opportunity to do a glow up instead of lowering your standards. A healed empath doesn't confuse like empathy with tolerance, and then in turn for disrespect. And a healed empath understands this. Love should not require self-deception or self-abandonment. Okay, guys, so before we close out, if this resonates with you, just remember, or if you felt like any of these things you can relate to, just remember that you're not fried. This is just a statement that I'm using to give you examples of my theory. Okay, you're waking up, though. You're not fried, you're waking up. And waking up feels a bit uncomfortable because scrambled thinking starts to separate. When you're scrambled, this is, your thinking has to separate. And and remember, if you made scrambled eggs with those eggs, it's almost impossible. I would even say it's impossible. But I know that if someone had a special tool, they could probably unscramble an egg and remove the yolk and the white part. But that would be very difficult to do and tedious. So that's why healing is important, and never rushing the timeline of your healing, because you're going to, some people heal within a year, and then you have some people, the more trauma they had, they heal maybe 10 years from there, or 15 or 20 years if they get the right resources. But sometimes people are never fully healed, and they're constantly working on them being healed mentally and emotionally, and as they age. It's kind of like a never-ending story. So until next time, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button, please, and don't forget to subscribe. Just remember, this whole channel that I'm doing is not really for us to stay scrambled, right? It's intended for us to grow and heal, but it doesn't have to be at the same time. Everybody has a different space of healing and learning and growing. And I'm still learning. We're all still learning. But yes, until next time, whenever you listen to this video, day or night, thank you guys for your support. And I will see you next time. Ciao.